Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I thought I'd talk about a topic that's probably going to trigger a few people. Probably get a few guys' panties in a wad. And that's handgun round effectiveness. But before I get started, I just want to make a few things clear so I don't have guys first thing getting in the comments trying to explain things to me. I'm going to be talking about three main calibers here, and I want to make it clear that, all three calibers that I am talking about are fully capable of killing someone, and that all three calibers here have an ability to stop someone. So I'm not saying that any of these calibers cannot stop someone, and that if you put the bullets where they need to go, yeah, they're going to stop someone. And that's not what this video is about. I've carried the 9mm. I personally carry the 40 right now. I've carried the 45 before. I don't have a problem carrying any of them, but I want to discuss the benefits of some of these and why I think, some of them have more of a benefit than maybe one of the others or a few of the others, whatever. But yeah, I'm gonna talk about that, and my understanding, is counter to what the modern understanding of ballistics is right now, and what some of these guys in the lab suits are telling you, or what some guy in a white coat who looks at wound channels will tell you. So yeah, on this chart right here, or chart, it's target, but I've got some numbers written down. And if you've ever shot a steel target, one that requires a little bit of force to spin it around, you might have noticed something. That if you shoot it, like say with a 9mm, sometimes it'll struggle to spin around. And then you shoot it with a bigger bullet and it has no problem spinning around. Now, I've done this with my own target. I've got what's called a PT hostage target, and it's got a 6-inch steel plate on it. And I'll shoot it with a 9mm round that has around 356 foot-pounds of energy, say. And then I'll shoot it with a 45 ACP target load. That's got about the same exact energy, around 356, foot-pounds of energy. And then it'll have no problems spinning it around. The 9mm, I'll hit it with a 9mm, it won't spin it, but then I'll hit it with a 45 and it will spin it. So there was a definite, when you watch that 45 hit it, it'll spin it. Same thing with the 40 Smith & Wesson. It's a 180 grain bullet, it'll hit it. Even though the foot-pounds of energy was similar, even it would hit the plate and it would spin the plate around. So there was a definite difference in the way it would impact that plate. So when you look at the box, you're like, well, the energy is the same. Why isn't the force on target the same? Well, that's because there's a difference between energy on paper versus useful energy. And I've even tried this with plus P 9mm rounds. Because I've tested out, like Federal HST, which is newer bullet technology. So, okay, well, they say with modern bullet technology, that the 9mm is now equal to the bigger rounds. Well, I've tested out the Federal HST rounds, and yeah, this is on a steel target. But, I shot the target, 396 foot-pounds of energy. Okay, the 40 Smith & Wesson had 408 foot-pounds of energy. It was a little bit more, not much more. And then the 45 ACP had 404 foot-pounds of energy. So that was a little bit more, but I was shooting out of a Glock 30. So actually it was not more, because I was shooting the 9mm of a 4-inch barrel. And so those numbers are closer to being more true than the Glock 30 was. So yeah, these were, you know, closer to being the same. But yeah, even then, the 9mm still had, you know, couldn't knock the plate around to the other side, but the 40 and the 45 could. So there was a difference there. So that tells you right there that there's the calculation for kinetic energy isn't quite accurate as far as useful energy when it comes to a handgun round. And even Tim Sundles over at Buffalo War Ammunition, who owns Buffalo War Ammunition, yeah, he's even stated himself. He says that kinetic energy is about 90%, 90% false, you know, and when it comes to understanding power and effectiveness of a round. And he doesn't just, you know, he doesn't just manufacture ammo. You know, he actually uses his ammunition. You know, he hunts all over the place, and he's had to stop charging animals. You know, he not just with a rifle, but with a handgun. So he's got an understanding of kinetic energy versus what bullets actually do. And while I'm talking about handgun rounds, and he's mainly talking about probably rifles and self-defense with you know, he carries some big revolvers, but he also carries 45s, you know, 45 ACP handguns in the woods, especially in the lower 48. He'll carry a 45 with him commonly because he likes a bigger round. But yeah, he has an understanding that, you know, kinetic energy does not equal useful energy. And you're like, okay, so what does this have to do with handgun round effectiveness? Because all the experts say, well, in the modern understanding of handgun round effectiveness, energy doesn't really play a role. You know, it's you got to be doing at least 2,000 feet per second. You got to, only rifle rounds, you know, do anything when it comes to energy, right? Well, when you watch a 40 Smith & Wesson or a 45 ACP handgun, you watch a 45 round, knock that plate around. You watch a 40 Smith & Wesson, knock that plate around. The 9mm does not. And then you look at history, and you see how effective it was on the 45 was on the battlefield, and the reputation it had of putting guys on their ass. And no, we're not talking about the myths, because that's the very first thing that these experts will tell you. That everybody who's talking about putting guys on their ass are talking about the 45 literally lifting people off their feet, you know, as if we're saying that this chunk of lead here is going to physically, you know, move them off their feet and put them on their ass. No, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying that force that's being displayed on the target, that steel plate, when it penetrates the human body and it's crushing through the flesh and the bone, and it's that sudden stop, yeah, it's having an effect, and it's knocking guys. Yeah, it'll knock you backwards a little bit. It'll turn your body. Let me try to get my screen back up here. But yeah. Yeah, and if you look at the Thompson and Lagarde experiments that they did before we even got the 45 ACP, and this was after the Chamorro Indian, or the war in the Philippines when we were fighting the Chamorro Indians. You know, because these guys will tell you that, well, what you're seeing is the psychological effects of being hit by a round. Not just any caliber, just a round. But yet, you look at the reality of the 38 caliber round not doing anything to the Chamorro Indians that were charging them. These were drugged up, They were drugged up and they were charging at our soldiers. And then when a guy would, some of them had 45 Colt round, they had the 45 Colt revolvers, and they would pull them out and shoot the Chamorro Indians, and they would actually stop. They would get an effect. So was that psychology? Was that a psychological effect of being shot? Oh, they weren't reacting to being shot with a 38, but now they're reacting to being hit with a 45. And guess what? They weren't always hitting them in the CNS or the brain box. That CNS right there. That's kind of hard to hit. That when you hit somebody's center mass, that's not always a guarantee you're going to hit the CNS. So yeah, when you hit somebody's center mass, you hit the vitals, but you don't always hit the CNS, the central nervous system. So yeah, not all these hits are CNS hits, but yet these guys are reacting to being hit. The bigger bullet, the bigger slug is getting a reaction. They weren't getting a reaction with a lighter bullet. So yeah, now fast forward to the test that, after this conflict, they realized they needed a different round. And so they did the Thompson and Lagarde test in 1904. Well, when they were getting ready to do the test, the manufacturer of the 9mm Luger round told Thompson and Lagarde that, well, their bullet would outperform the larger rounds because the 9mm Luger had more kinetic energy than their larger rounds. Yeah, it had 301 foot-pounds of energy versus, say, something like the 45 Colt round did, which had 288 foot-pounds of energy. But, like, say, for instance, during one of the tests that they did, which was called the quick fire test, they shot a cow. The objective of the test was to shoot the cow fairly quickly and see how long it would take and how many rounds it would take, and then how long it would take for them to drop to the ground. Well, they had to shoot the cow 6 times in the lungs with a 45 Colt before it would drop and die. And it thrashed around, and then it dropped to the ground and died. And then they shot it with a 9mm 10 times in the lungs. Didn't do anything. And then they shot it 2 more times in the abdomen. Still nothing. So then, based on the slaughterhouse protocol, they had to hit it in the head with a hammer to kill it. Because it still, after twice as many rounds, it was not reacting. So yeah, there was a difference there. So I think we've established that even back in 1904, kinetic energy didn't even matter. But you got all throughout history, manufacturers still writing kinetic energy outside of a box because that was what sold ammo. Because, they needed to write something on the side of the box that people could look at and say, oh, well, this round's more power, it's powerful. No. You need to be looking at something else there. Something that hunters have realized for a very long time, that a big bullet, a big slug, or guys who have encountered dangerous game have realized for a long time, that a big slug does something that the lighter bullets cannot do. So, and it's not just about, well, we need the bigger slug to punch through the bigger skull of the bear, or to break through the shoulder to get to the heart. Well, yeah, that is part of it. Yeah, you need to be able to do that. That's what momentum does. But a lot of it is that extra momentum helping stop that bear in mid-stride heading right to you, or that buffalo or whatever is heading right to you. Yeah, you need that punch, that extra energy, usable energy that, from that bullet as it's coming right at you. And yeah, a chunk of lead traveling at a certain velocity, energy in motion, that's momentum. the bigger the chunk of lead, the more energy it takes to stop that chunk of lead. And when your body is stopping that chunk of lead, that sudden stop, yeah, it's going to move you back. It's not going to lift you off your feet, but it's going to move you back. You're going to react a little bit to it. And there was even, another retired military guy like myself, who actually got to carry, the 1911, who even said himself, I think he was a range officer after he got out, but he was a retired military guy who actually carried the 1911 before he went to the 9mm, and said that, he actually shot guys with the 45, and that when he hit them with the round, they actually would turn, depending upon exactly where they got hit. They would turn or they would move back. There was a reaction there from the round hitting them, which showed that there was some force to the round. He didn't say they got lifted off their feet, but yeah, there was some force to the round. They reacted to being hit with that round. And then later on, when he did have to shoot people with a 9mm round, there was not the same reaction. He said they didn't turn. They didn't get pushed back. He said that, in all the cases where he had to shoot the individuals, the rounds killed them, because if you shoot them in the vitals, they're going to eventually die, especially when you follow up with a head shot, because, if you're military and your job is to eliminate a target, you're not just going to double tap somebody in the chest. If you're eliminating a target, you're going to, finish up with a headshot or whatever. But yeah, like I said, all these rounds kill. But he was just acknowledging the fact that there was something to the fact that the 45 does impart energy. It does impart force onto the human body in a way that the smaller rounds do not. And so when you hear these guys on the internet, or these experts, whether they work for the government or not, these guys in the lab suit their job is to sell an agency on the idea that they need to switch to the smaller caliber, the agents need to be sold on this idea that they all need to move to the smaller round, especially the ones who preferred the bigger bullet. This is just a theory, these are just rumors, I'm not saying that this is, what, they're actually doing, but, we've all heard the rumors, right? Yeah. You can listen to the guys who are actually in the agency who were there. Some of them have actually said. Of course, there's others that will say no. That's not why we moved to the 9mm. But okay, whatever. But this is they'll tell you that they're the ones that came up with all this crap that we're hearing on the in the gun community now. Well, you've got young guys on the internet. Anytime somebody says that they carry a 40 or a 45, you'll get these guys on the internet. It's not about the caliber. It's about shot placement. Do you not think that we don't understand shot placement? Do you not think that we understand that, the ultimate goal is to hit the CNS? Do you not think I don't train to hit the CNS? Oh yeah. I spend a lot of time trying to hit that spot on the target, It's not easy hitting that. You know what you got to do to hit that? let me show you something here. Come here, Bob. You get to play. Meet Bob. See, when you hit Bob in the center mass, and you hit him in the vitals, you don't automatically hit him in the central nervous system. You might hit the heart, you might hit the lungs, but you don't hit the CNS. Now, in order to hit the central nervous system from a shot like that, that bullet has got to travel through his torso. Don't mind these tubes. Bob used to train people, train medical students. But he's retired now. So yeah, once that bullet strikes the vitals, it also has to travel through, and then it has to strike right back here. It's got to be a perfect line strike. And it's got to travel through the torso and hit the spine. You know how hard that is in real life? You know how many guys actually get that shot in real life? Yeah. That's why you follow up with a headshot if you're eliminating a threat or eliminating the target. And also there's a difference between, you know, like the military guy I was talking about who, you know, had to shoot a few guys with a 45 and then the 9mm versus maybe a cop that spent 25, 30 years, and then all of a sudden one day he actually has to shoot somebody for real. You know, you have to shoot a few people to get the understanding that, wow, the 45 does kind of push somebody a little bit. And the 9mm doesn't really push somebody back a little bit. I don't care if it's a hollow point or a Full Metal Jacket round or not, and I'll get into that. And they're discovering this based on the tactics, because you know the tactics kind of tell you something too. But yeah, when you train day in and out doing double taps with a 45 with a 1911, and you're conditioned to kill, to eliminate threats, you know, the target, be somebody who might qualify a few times a year with a handgun, and then you show up at a compound or whatever in the middle of the night, bust through a door, surprise somebody, and double tap them to the chest like you were trained to do, conditioned, you know, you're conditioned to kill. And then you put one in the head. That's a different situation than somebody is trying to make an arrest. And then all of a sudden it goes, you know, the guy you're trying to arrest, you know, decides to surprise you, and now you're fighting for your life, and you got to pull your gun, and all of a sudden you're throwing rounds at this guy who's trying to kill you. And before it's all said and done, you don't even know how many rounds you just fired, regardless of caliber. And maybe you used a 40 or a 45. And maybe it hit the vitals. Was it round number 5 or 6 that hit the vitals? I mean, you hit him in the leg, you hit him in the shoulder, you hit him here, you hit him there. And then you're trying to say, well, I used the 40 or the 45, and I didn't, in my gunfight, and I didn't see much of a difference between, you know, that and the 9mm in a gunfight. Well, it's hard to make a judgment based off of that one incident, that one gunfight, versus a history of understanding of how calibers work. Or if you're a young guy in special operations and you were only issued the 9mm, And so you were taught to drill the target, and that's all you know, and you saw the effects of drilling the target, which is 5 rounds or more, and you say, okay, well, you get out or you get on the internet or whatever, and you say, yeah, 9mm works. Yeah, it works with that tactic. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about, this discussion is about the effectiveness of rounds based on what we know through history versus what they're telling us now. Because yeah, when I said tactics, from the time we got the 1911 in the very beginning, and we got the 45 ECP round, the tactic was a double tap to the center mass, which includes the vitals, the heart, lung area, you know, and then a follow-up should it be needed in most combat situations, you know, because that was based on the average person in a gunfight, not the rare cases. We understand that there are rare cases where guys just don't respond, but that's also why you follow up. So yeah, there's stories out there. There's a few of them probably, but there's one story that you always hear on the internet. Well, there was a cop. He got into a gunfight with a guy and shot him like 8 or 9 times with a 45. And he just would not stop fighting. And he even hit him in the vitals. Yeah, it happens. But I'm talking about the normal full-grown male when he gets hit center mass with a 45. That's what the tactic was based on, and it didn't change. Even up through GWAT, when the Special Forces guys or the Special Ops guys who actually got to carry the 45 were using it, that was the standard tactic. It didn't change. The only, if you know, if something doesn't change for over 100 years, there's a reason for it. And people didn't just suddenly become harder to kill. Have you not noticed? Guys are not harder to kill. They've become weaker. The enemy's not harder to kill. So don't let them bullshit you. I mean, when I became a senior NCO, our first sergeant brought us in the office for a mentoring session and told us that our job as senior NCOs was to sell the shit sandwich. Well, I was never very good at selling the shit sandwich, because from having been there, you know, I didn't have any respect for a leader that would try to bullshit me. You know, I had more respect for somebody who could tell me something was a shit sandwich and could tell me, you know, this is what you signed up for. Now do your freaking job. Yeah. So I got pretty good at, you know, I could pick up on BS, especially in the government. So when I see a study and things kind of stick out to me as, you know, okay, this is not science, this is marketing. You know, I see what they're trying to do here. I mean, come on, have we not learned anything over the last few years here about guys with white coats or lab suits? If they need to sell you on something, oh, they can do it. And there's plenty, and it's always the majority who follow whatever the authority is on a subject, right? You know, I listened to a certain agency when they went to a certain round back in the 90s because it was based on performance of the round. I understood what they were saying. And yeah, it was based on it was a better caliber. Yeah, it was. The 40 Smith & Wesson is a better caliber. But you know what happened? They also said the 9mm was not a viable option, the 9mm caliber. Well, when you say something like that, guess what happens? And when you later on need to go back to it, well, you got to sell it, that the caliber is now a viable option. So say, for instance, in 1997, when you say this, the New York Police Department says, you know what? Instead of going to this new caliber, I'm just going to go over to one of these manufacturers, and we're gonna make a better bullet technology. What? In the late 90s? Newer bullet technology? Oh yeah. So by 2001, guess what the New York Police Department had? Yeah, I mean, it took a few years, but by 2001, all 36,000 officers they had? 36,000 police officers? They all had the Spear Gold Dot plus P round. I don't know if I still got some around here. Yeah, I've got some old boxes of Spear Gold Dot plus P somewhere. I didn't think to get it for this, but yeah, it's been around quite a while. And you know what? To this day, it's still considered one of the best rounds. A lot of guys will either carry Federal HST, which is newer bullet technology, or they'll carry the Spear Gold Dot. Yeah, it does real well in the ballistics gel test. But then you fast forward to 2007 when they start to look at the 9mm again, and they say, well, due to newer bullet technology, we're going to consider it again. No, it's been around, dude. Yeah. No, don't bullshit me. But you know, that's a theory. You know, I'm not going to say that's why they went to it. It's just kind of a theory of mine. So I'm not going to put words in their mouths, but you know, some of us have some theories. You know, we've heard some things. You know, like qualifications. You know, people couldn't qualify on the range and couldn't get promoted. Certain individuals, you know, the 80% miss rate in a firefight and a gunfight. Yeah, I mean, I understand why you would need to go to a smaller caliber. I'm not saying it's a wrong reason, but when you start bullshitting people, that's when I have a problem. You know, I like honesty. Don't bullshit me. But there's nothing wrong with the 9mm caliber. I've got a few smaller 9mm that I will shoot. You know, a micro compact, you don't want to shoot that in a 40. No, because in that size gun, it's not effective. You know, I can't shoot it really fast. You know, a Glock 27, and for me, I'm a 240-pound man. I can handle a Glock 27 just fine, but you know, another man who might be a 150, 125, whatever, he may not like that recoil. May have a hard time controlling the gun. I mean, hell, I've got numbness in these two fingers right now from a back injury that, you know, I've had for a while. Yeah, that pinched nerve in the back, you know, so it creates numbness in my hand. So yeah, I've got issues, but I can still control a 40 Smith & Wesson just fine. But you know, they'll tell you that, well, 40 Smith & Wesson has too much recoil. Yeah, whatever. But a full-grown man should be able to handle a 40 Smith & Wesson just fine if I can. You know, I'm a disabled veteran. If a disabled vet can handle a 40 Smith & Wesson, then I reckon any 100% functional police officer or military should be able to handle it too. Or a 45 ACP, yeah, they should be able to handle it too. But, you know, hey. But for the average citizen, whatever, you know, a 9mm is fine. It can get the job done. You just might have to fire a few more rounds. And like I said, based on the tactics, it's not a coincidence that we found out you had to put more rounds center mass with a 9mm. You had to drill the target five rounds or more versus a couple of rounds center mass with the 45. That was a tactic. It didn't change till the round changed. Tactics are based on the effectiveness of the round you're using. You look at these classes that they teach, they're based around the effectiveness of the round, the capacity of the guns that everybody's using. Yeah, it all correlates. So when you see these guys on the internet, well, your gun doesn't hold enough rounds. That's because you're learning tactics that are based on the 9mm, not on the 45 ACP or even the 40 Smith & Wesson. So, yeah, I do double taps when I'm doing my training, even with a 40 Smith & Wesson. Well, I have to shoot them maybe another time or two with a 40 Smith & Wesson versus a 45. I don't know, maybe. Prepared to do it, yeah, if I have to. But, you know, do I need to drill a target with my 40 or my 45? No, probably not. But like Clint Smith says, you keep shooting till the threat is eliminated, till the threat is down, till they're not trying to do you harm anymore. Yeah. And if I'm carrying a 9mm on the day that it happens, if I need to stop somebody, well, I'll keep shooting them till the threat's down. And if I got my 40 that day, same thing. It's just when I can carry a bigger round, I'm going to do it because there's a possibility that, yeah, the 40 or my 45, I may not have to use as many rounds. And if for a concealed carry situation where I don't already have my gun drawn and I have to make a split decision that, oh crap, now it's for real and this guy is trying to kill me, because you can't pull your gun until you know they're actually trying to kill you, until your life is in danger. So at that point, this is why they say, well, it happens in less than 3 yards and you usually shoot about 3 rounds, because you don't have enough time to, you know, get your gun out and fire a bunch of rounds in a real self-defense situation. You know, unless you're in that situation where you got an active shooter and then you got time to get your gun out, and hopefully the active shooter doesn't see you before you get your front sight or your red dot on him and can eliminate him before he notices you, or get rounds on him before he takes notice and gets his rifle on you. Because yeah, handgun vs rifle is your chances of survival, or, you know, you need to get rounds on him before he can get them on you. So yeah. But yeah, I look at, you know, the force on target, the momentum. The 40 Smith & Wesson, when it hits the target when you see it hit a steel plate with more force than the 9mm, it's because it's actually hitting them with a little bit more useful energy. It's doing something that in a gunfight might give you an advantage. And that was the whole point of me showing the momentum, you know, difference versus, you know, there's another formula out there called the TKO that some guys use. And I put that on there too. You know, the Taylor knockout formula. Some guys use that. But yeah, having a bigger round can give you an advantage. So these guys out here on the internet who are going by this modern ballistics understanding, You know, because they listen to some guy in a lab or some guy who's only looked at cadavers, you know, dead men tell no tales. Yeah, those cadavers ain't telling them what happened to them when they got shot. No, they can tell you how fast they bled out. They can tell you, oh, this guy got hit in the CNS, so yeah, he must have stopped quickly. Or this guy, it took him so long to bleed out, so maybe he kept fighting for another, you know, minute or so. Well, he don't know. He wasn't there unless he saw the security cam footage, like the guy in Mapleton, Georgia. Yeah, the gun store owner in Mapleton, Georgia, who put down that robber with a couple of rounds with his 1911. Yeah, just like you would expect. The guy went back, froze up like you would expect. He reacted to being hit by the 45, and that was the end of it. He might not have expired immediately, but he went down. Yeah. So yeah, the goal is the CNS. That's for sure. That'll stop him, the CNS. But then you got to rely on the bullet. But you know, these CNS hits, those are hard to get in real life. So if you can get an advantage with your bullet, you know, that's kind of nice too. So it's all about giving yourself an advantage, you know. When people talk about bullet technology, well, bullet technology does not turn a 124 grain bullet into a 180 grain bullet or a 230 grain bullet. It doesn't give it any more power. All it does is make it expand at a certain distance within a gel block, and it makes it stop at a certain distance within a gel block. When they expand, when you use the exact same bullet technology, the bigger bullet expands more. Yeah. Why? Basic physics. They got more lead. They all penetrate to the distance that they need. You know, the FBI is standard for penetration. They all do it. You know, the 45 might, you know, not penetrate quite as far because guess what? It opens up to almost 0.85 inches. That's a big wound channel. But yeah, it'll punch through to the vitals. 40 usually makes it to about 18 inches in the gel block. But we aren't gel blocks either, so those tests can only show you so much. But yeah, this modern understanding of ballistics is based on marketing. It's a freaking marketing campaign. And when, you know, I tell you that a bullet has an advantage, a bigger bullet has an advantage over a smaller bullet, I'm telling you that it has a stopping capability, a slightly better stopping capability, aren't I? I'm not saying it's going to just stop somebody immediately, am I? I'm just saying it has a capability to possibly stop somebody. So when I identify that the bigger bullet has a capability that might potentially stop somebody, what am I doing? What am I saying? And if I want to keep somebody from identifying these capabilities, what would I say? Let's not say something. Yeah, let's make something politically incorrect to say. Let's pretend that everybody who carries a bigger round or says something is referring to some kind of myth that, oh, they hit their big toe and they're going to stop. Or if you hit them with a round, they're just going to knock them off their feet. We're going to shame anybody who wants to, in the agency, we're going to shame anybody who wants to keep the 40 Smith & Wesson. Yeah, that's what they do. It's about shaming them. Got to get everybody on board with the switch. That's what the government does. They get everybody on board with the switch. We got to shame anybody who doesn't want to, you know, get it. You think you're smart? You think you're any different than the kid on college campus with the blue hair? Only you got a man bun or skinny jeans? Come on. Don't be that guy. Be smarter. Use your head. Don't be that guy on the internet. Think for yourself. They're trying to market it. There's nothing wrong with carrying any of these rounds. Nothing wrong with it. They all work. But some of them still do have an advantage if you can shoot it well. Yeah, you need to be able to shoot it well. So if you can shoot the bigger bullet well, then carry it. I mean, you got to decide how many rounds you need in your gun. Yeah. I mean, a Glock 23 has freaking 13 rounds in the magazine. And you can carry more in the spare magazine. 15, you can carry a Glock 22 magazine. My Glock 30 has 10 rounds on board with another 13 in the magazine. Do you need a 21 round magazine in your gun? Well, that's up for you to decide. You know, what kind of John Wick situation you think you're going to get into? Hollywood? I know everybody's trying to live out a fantasy, but, you know, and there's plenty of people to sell you on a fantasy, especially some of us vets. We'll sell you on a fantasy. We'll train you up. Oh, yeah. Teach you how to be a killer. Teach you how to be John Wick. Kick in doors. I mean, it's fun, right? I mean, it could be useful. There might be a situation down the road where you might need to use it, right? But, you know, for everyday self-defense use, you know, what's more realistic? You know, what's more important? I'm a disabled veteran. I'm not going to do a whole lot now. I just want to be able to defend myself in everyday life. So, bigger round works for me. If I can carry it that day, if I need to drop down to a 9mm, guess what? I'll drop down. I'll make it work. So, do whatever makes sense to you. So, hope this helped. You know, I'm sure I got somebody's panties in a wad, but, you know, if I didn't and this helped you, you know, like and subscribe. And maybe I'll make a few more videos. So, thanks.